Marvin and Evelyn's love story had begun like many others, a chance meeting at a local coffee shop in their early 30s. Marvin, a rising star in a prestigious accounting firm, had been immediately smitten by Evelyn's warm smile and quick wit. Evelyn, a dedicated elementary school teacher, found herself drawn to Marvin's quiet confidence and dry humor. Their courtship was a whirlwind of romantic gestures and shared dreams, culminating in a picturesque wedding at Millbrook's historic chapel. For years, they seemed the perfect match. Marvin's career flourished, and he eventually became a partner at his firm. Their decision not to have children was mutual, allowing them to focus on their careers and each other. They poured their energy into their home, hosting legendary dinner parties and cultivating a circle of close-knit friends. Evelyn's book club meetings and Marvin's poker nights became fixtures in their social calendar. But as they entered their 50s, subtle cracks began to appear in their seemingly perfect union. Their conversations, once filled with laughter and shared confidences, became perfunctory exchanges about household chores and social obligations. As their 20th wedding anniversary approached, both Marvin and Evelyn found themselves questioning the future of their relationship. Neither could have predicted how their lives would soon be upended by the arrival of a young woman with vibrant blue hair and a contagious laugh. Zoe Carrington had never planned on becoming an Uber Eats driver. At 19, she was a bundle of creative energy and big dreams, her sketchbooks filled with designs for the fashion line she hoped to launch one day. But dreams don't pay the bills, and with her single mother battling cancer, Zoe needed flexible work to help make ends meet while still attending community college classes. Her 2008 Honda Civic, plastered with stickers from indie bands and environmental causes, became her office. Zoe approached her deliveries with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything in life, often brightening customers' days with her cheerful demeanor and genuine interest in their lives. It was on a rainy Tuesday evening when Zoe first encountered Marvin Hollister. She'd just picked up an order from Luigi's, the upscale Italian restaurant that was a Millbrook institution. As she navigated the winding streets of the suburbs, rain pelting her windshield, she couldn't help but marvel at the grand homes she passed. Pulling up to 1542 Sycamore Lane, Zoe grabbed the order and dashed to the front door, her bright blue hair peeking out from under her rain jacket's hood. As the door swung open, she found herself face to face with Marvin, who looked tired and disheveled, his tie loosened and shirt sleeves rolled up. Something in the air shifted as their eyes met. Zoe's practiced customer service smile faltered for a moment, replaced by a genuine curiosity about the man before her. Marvin, for his part, felt as if he'd been jolted awake from a long slumber. In that brief exchange, the passing of the food, the fumbling for a tip, the awkward thanks, a spark was ignited that would soon engulf both their lives in flames. In the days following their first encounter, Marvin found himself thinking about Zoe more often than he cared to admit. Her youthful energy and carefree spirit had stirred something long dormant within him. He began ordering from Luigi's with increasing frequency, always hoping she would be the one to deliver. Zoe, too, found herself looking forward to deliveries at the Hollister residence. She was drawn to Marvin's mature presence and the hint of sadness she sensed behind his eyes. Their interactions, though brief, grew longer with each encounter. Small talk about the weather evolved into discussions about books, music, and dreams. One rainy evening, much like the night they first met, Marvin invited Zoe inside while he searched for cash for a tip. As thunder rumbled outside, they found themselves standing closer than necessary in the foyer. The air crackled with tension, and before either could fully process what was happening, they were in each other's arms, lips meeting in a passionate kiss. Guilt and exhilaration warred within Marvin as he pulled away. He's 20 years older than her, he thought. He's married. This is wrong on so many levels, but the feeling of Zoe's body against his, the taste of her lips, the way she looked at him with unbridled desire, it all felt too right to ignore. For Zoe, the kiss was a revelation. She dated boys her age, but none had made her feel the way Marvin did. The wrongness of it only added to the allure. She knew she should walk away, but the pull was too strong. Their affair began in earnest, stolen moments whenever they could manage. Marvin invented business trips and late nights at the office. Zoe picked up extra shifts, telling her mother she was earning money for her fashion dreams while really using the time to meet Marvin at a motel on the outskirts of town. In those clandestine encounters, both found what they'd been missing. For Marvin, it was passion and the feeling of being truly seen and appreciated. For Zoe, it was the excitement of a forbidden romance and the attention of a mature man who seemed to value her thoughts and aspirations. But as the weeks turned into months, the weight of their deception began to take its toll. Marvin's lies to Evelyn became more elaborate and harder to maintain. He found himself snapping at her over small things, his guilt manifesting as irritation. Evelyn, confused by the sudden change in her husband's behavior, tried even harder to reconnect, which only made Marvin feel worse. Zoe, meanwhile, struggled with the reality of being the other woman. She found herself canceling plans with friends, making up excuses for her absences. The excitement of the affair was increasingly tainted by the knowledge that she was helping to destroy a marriage. Despite these challenges, neither seemed able to break free from the intoxicating pull of their relationship. They convinced themselves that what they had was special, that it transcended societal norms and expectations. But as summer faded into fall, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, threatening to wash away the fragile world they had built together. As autumn leaves began to carpet the lawns of Millbrook, Marvin's web of lies grew increasingly complex. He created a fictional client, complete with a backstory about a messy divorce and complicated finances, to justify his frequent absences and late nights. Evelyn, initially sympathetic to her husband's increased workload, began to notice inconsistencies in his stories. One evening, as Marvin prepared to leave for another supposed late-night meeting, Evelyn casually mentioned that she had run into his colleague Dexter at the grocery store. Dexter had expressed surprise that Marvin was working so much, as the firm had actually been going through a quiet period. Marvin, caught off guard, mumbled something about confidentiality and client privacy before hurrying out the door, leaving Evelyn staring after him with a furrowed brow. The close calls began to multiply. Once, Marvin forgot to remove Zoe's lipstick-stained napkin from his jacket pocket before tossing it in the laundry. Another time, he answered a call from Zoe while in the same room as Evelyn, his face flushing as he made up an excuse about a wrong number. Each near miss left him more paranoid and on edge. Zoe, for her part, found it increasingly difficult to maintain her usual cheerful demeanor. Her mother, noticing her daughter's distraction and frequent mood swings, worried that the stress of work and school was becoming too much. Zoe's friends complained that she was always canceling plans at the last minute, and her grades began to slip as she prioritized a rendezvous with Marvin over her studies. The toll on the Hollisters' marriage became impossible to ignore. Family dinners, once a nightly ritual filled with conversation and laughter, devolved into silent, tense affairs. Evelyn's attempts to discuss their relationship were met with evasion or irritation from Marvin. She found herself lying awake at night, listening to the unfamiliar rhythm of her husband's breathing, and wondering when he had become a stranger. As the deception deepened, both Marvin and Zoe found themselves living double lives, constantly on guard and struggling to keep their stories straight. The thrill of their forbidden romance was increasingly overshadowed by the stress of maintaining their secret. Yet, neither seemed able to break free from the emotional tangle they had created, each convinced that the other was worth the mounting cost to their personal lives and integrity. As autumn progressed, Zoe found herself falling deeper into her relationship with Marvin. What had started as an exciting fling was blossoming into something more profound, at least in her young and inexperienced heart. She began to daydream about a future where they could be together openly, imagining romantic getaways and cozy evenings at home. During their stolen moments together, Zoe would often broach the subject of their future. "You know, we could really make this work," she'd say, her eyes shining with hope. "We could move to a new city, start fresh where no one knows us." Marvin would usually deflect these comments with a sad smile or a change of subject, but Zoe refused to be deterred. She started dropping hints about her feelings in more public ways. Her social media accounts, once filled with selfies and art projects, began featuring cryptic posts about forbidden love and age being just a number. She even wrote a thinly veiled poem about their relationship for her creative writing class, earning concerned looks from her professor. As her attachment grew, so did her impatience with the secretive nature of their affair. She began to pressure Marvin to leave Evelyn, her youthful idealism convincing her that true love should conquer all obstacles. "Can't you see how perfect we are together?" she would plead. "Don't you want to be happy?" Marvin, torn between his growing feelings for Zoe and the reality of his life with Evelyn, found himself increasingly stressed by Zoe's expectations. He knew he cared for her deeply, but the thought of upending his entire life, his marriage, his career, his standing in the community, filled him with dread. The more Marvin hesitated, the more desperate Zoe became. She began to show up unexpectedly at places she knew he frequented, hoping for a chance encounter that might force his hand. Her deliveries to the Hollister home became more frequent, each one a risk she was willing to take for a glimpse of the man she believed she loved. As winter approached, the pressure continued to mount, with Zoe's growing attachment pushing their delicate situation towards an inevitable breaking point. As the first snow of winter dusted the streets of Millbrook, the passionate flame of Marvin and Zoe's affair began to sputter and dim. The weight of their deception, combined with the mounting pressure from Zoe for a more committed relationship, started to take its toll on Marvin. During one of their clandestine meetings at the motel, Marvin arrived distracted and irritable. Zoe, sensing his mood, tried to lighten the atmosphere with her usual cheerful banter, but her efforts fell flat. When she once again brought up the idea of them starting a new life together, Marvin snapped. "This isn't a fairy tale, Zoe," he said, his voice harsh with frustration. "I have a life, a career, responsibilities. I can't just throw it all away on a whim." Zoe recoiled as if she'd been slapped. "A whim? Is that all I am to you?" she demanded, tears welling in her eyes. The argument that followed was their first real fight, laying bare the fundamental differences in their expectations and life experiences. Zoe's youthful idealism clashed violently with Marvin's middle-aged pragmatism. They parted that day without resolving anything, both feeling hurt and misunderstood. In the weeks that followed, their meetings became less frequent and more strained. Marvin, racked with guilt over hurting Zoe and betraying Evelyn, began to withdraw emotionally. Zoe, desperate to hold on to what she saw as her great love story, became increasingly clingy and demanding. The situation reached a boiling point when Zoe, frustrated by Marvin's continued reluctance to leave his wife, threatened to reveal their affair to Evelyn. "If you won't choose me, I'll make the choice for you," she declared during a heated phone call. Marvin, panicked at the thought of his carefully constructed life imploding, pleaded with Zoe to be reasonable. He promised to make changes, to spend more time with her, anything to keep their secret safe. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew things had gone too far. As December arrived, bringing with it the festive cheer of the holiday season, Marvin found himself trapped in a nightmare of his own making. At home, Evelyn's suspicions had grown to the point where she was barely speaking to him, her silence more accusatory than any words could be. And with Zoe, every interaction felt like navigating a minefield, never knowing what might trigger another emotional outburst or threat of exposure. The once passionate affair had devolved into a source of constant stress and fear for Marvin. He knew something had to give, but felt powerless to control the course of events he had set in motion. Little did he know that fate, in the form of his increasingly suspicious wife, was about to force his hand in the most dramatic way possible. While Marvin grappled with the deteriorating affair, Evelyn was piecing together a puzzle she never wanted to solve. The signs, once easy to dismiss, had become impossible to ignore. Late-night phone calls that Marvin took in hushed tones on the back porch, mysterious receipts for restaurants they'd never visited together, the lingering scent of an unfamiliar perfume on his clothes. One evening, while Marvin was supposedly working late, Evelyn found herself staring at his side of the closet. On an impulse, she began rifling through his pockets, her heart racing with the knowledge that she was crossing a line. In the inner pocket of a jacket, her trembling fingers closed around a small, folded piece of paper. As she opened it, her world tilted on its axis. It was a handwritten note, the looping script unmistakably feminine. "Last night was amazing. I can't wait to feel your touch again. All my love, Z." Evelyn sank to the floor, the note clutched to her chest as silent sobs racked her body. In that moment, all her suspicions crystallized into a devastating reality. Her husband, her partner of 20 years, was having an affair. In the days that followed, Evelyn became a detective in her own home. She scoured credit card statements, noting patterns in Marvin's spending. She paid attention to the Uber Eats deliveries, her eyes narrowing each time she saw a flash of blue hair. She even went so far as to install a tracking app on Marvin's phone, justifying the invasion of privacy as necessary for uncovering the truth. Finally, driven to desperation by the mounting evidence and Marvin's continued deception, Evelyn made a decision she never thought she'd have to make. With shaking hands, she dialed the number of a private investigator recommended by a colleague who'd gone through a messy divorce. "I need to know the truth," she told the investigator, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever it is, I need to know." As she hung up the phone, Evelyn felt a mix of dread and determination. The truth, she realized, might shatter her world, but living in doubt was slowly killing her. Little did she know how prophetic that thought would prove to be. The day that would change everything dawned cold and gray, a fitting backdrop for the drama about to unfold. Evelyn, armed with a file of damning evidence from the private investigator, had planned to confront Marvin that evening. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Marvin had told Evelyn he would be working late again, but a call from a concerned neighbor tipped her off that his car was in the driveway mid-afternoon. Heart pounding, Evelyn left work early and drove home, her mind racing with possibilities, each more painful than the last. As she pulled into the driveway, she noticed a familiar Honda Civic parked a little way down the street, the same car she'd seen making countless deliveries over the past months. With a sense of grim determination, Evelyn entered her home as quietly as possible. The house was eerily quiet, but as she climbed the stairs, she heard muffled voices coming from the bedroom. Her bedroom. The bedroom she shared with Marvin. With each step, the voices grew clearer, punctuated by sounds that left no doubt as to what was happening behind that closed door. For a moment, Evelyn stood frozen, her hand on the doorknob. In that suspended second, a lifetime of memories flashed through her mind. Her first date with Marvin. Their wedding day. Quiet nights spent planning their future together. With a deep breath, she twisted the knob and pushed the door open. The scene that greeted her was exactly as she had feared, yet somehow more devastating than she could have imagined. Marvin and a young woman with bright blue hair scrambled to cover themselves, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt. "Evelyn," Marvin gasped, his face pale with fear. "It's not. I can explain." But Evelyn was beyond explanations. 20 years of love, trust, and shared dreams lay shattered at her feet. The pain was quickly giving way to a rage she had never experienced before. "How could you?" she screamed, advancing into the room. "In our bed? In our home?" Zoe, clutching a sheet to her chest, looked between Marvin and Evelyn with growing panic. "This isn't how it was supposed to happen," she said, her voice small and frightened. "Shut up!" Evelyn snapped, rounding on the young woman. "You have no right to speak. You're nothing but a homewrecker, a child playing at being a woman." Marvin, having pulled on his pants, tried to approach Evelyn. "Please," he begged, "let's talk about this calmly. We can work this out." "Work this out?" Evelyn laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think we can work this out? You've destroyed everything." The argument escalated quickly, years of unspoken resentments and fresh pain pouring out in a torrent of accusations and recriminations. Zoe, overwhelmed by the situation, began to cry, which only fueled Evelyn's anger further. As the shouting reached a fever pitch, something in Evelyn snapped. With a sudden, eerie calm, she turned and walked out of the room. Marvin and Zoe exchanged a confused look, the abrupt silence more unnerving than the previous chaos. Neither of them was prepared for what happened next. Evelyn returned to the bedroom, her face a mask of cold determination. In her hand was the gun Marvin had insisted they keep in the house for protection, a decision that would prove fatally ironic. Marvin's eyes widened in horror. "Evelyn," he said, his voice trembling, "put the gun down. Let's talk about this." But Evelyn wasn't interested in talking anymore. With a steady hand, she pointed the gun at Marvin. "How long?" she demanded. "How long have you been sleeping with this child?" Zoe, paralyzed with fear, could only stare at the weapon. "This isn't happening," she thought frantically. "This can't be real." Marvin, hands raised in a placating gesture, tried to reason with his wife. "Evelyn, please," he begged. "This is crazy. You don't want to do this." For a moment, the only sound in the room was their ragged breathing. Then, Zoe made a fatal mistake. In a burst of panic-induced bravery, she lunged for the gun. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. There was a struggle, a tangle of limbs and desperate grasping. Marvin shouted, trying to separate the two women. Then, a deafening crack split the air. Time seemed to freeze. Zoe stumbled backward, a look of confusion on her face. She looked down at her chest, where a crimson stain was rapidly spreading across the sheet still clutched to her body. "Oh," she said softly, before crumpling to the floor. Evelyn dropped the gun as if it had burned her, the reality of what she'd done crashing over her. Marvin rushed to Zoe's side, pressing his hands against the wound in a futile attempt to stem the bleeding. As Zoe's life ebbed away on the bedroom floor, the sound of sirens grew in the distance. The idyllic facade of suburban life on Sycamore Lane had been shattered forever, leaving 3 lives irrevocably changed in its wake. Detective Liam Donovan, a veteran of the Millbrook Police Department, took charge of the crime scene. As he entered the Hollister home, he was struck by the contrast between the tasteful decor and the chaos that had erupted within its walls. Upstairs, he found a tableau of tragedy. Zoe Carrington, barely out of her teens, lay lifeless on the floor, the sheet covering her body stained a deep crimson. Marvin Hollister sat slumped against the wall, his hands and chest covered in blood, his eyes vacant with shock. Evelyn Hollister was seated on the bed, eerily calm, staring at the gun on the floor as if it were a venomous snake. Over the next few hours, the Hollister home became a hive of activity. Crime scene technicians meticulously documented every detail, from the position of the body to the blood spatter patterns on the walls. Detectives interviewed the shell-shocked couple separately, piecing together the events that had led to this tragic moment. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the scene, Detective Donovan stood on the front lawn, surveying the quiet street. Behind him, Evelyn Hollister was being led to a police car in handcuffs, while paramedics wheeled out a body bag containing Zoe's remains. The detective sighed heavily, knowing that the repercussions of this night would be felt in Millbrook for years to come. As the trial progressed, every aspect of the Hollisters' lives was laid bare for public consumption. Their marital troubles, financial records, and personal correspondence became fodder for endless speculation and armchair psychology. The image of the perfect suburban couple was irrevocably shattered, replaced by a complex portrait of human frailty and destructive choices. In the end, Evelyn Hollister was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge, taking into account the circumstances of the crime and Evelyn's lack of prior criminal history, sentenced her to 18 years in prison. As she was led away from the courtroom, the once proud teacher looked small and broken, the weight of her actions visible in the slump of her shoulders. Marvin Hollister, his reputation in tatters, resigned from his firm and left Millbrook shortly after the trial.